It's a great pleasure to be here. And first, I want to thank the SRA and the SDP for organizing this seminar. So let me tell you what is our challenge. Consider a risk management decision under uncertainty, for example, medical. Two decision makers, a human being, the user, and an AI support system, for example, the doctor. They have the same information base, but two different risk attitudes for the AI and encoded utility function in general. The best option may not be the same for both. The AI system risk attitude needs to be aligned with the decision maker's preferences because, as usual, two decision makers with the same information but different risk attitudes might make different rational decisions. So here is our question, is how to identify the discrepancy and align the risk attitude of the AI system to the preferences of the decision maker, so that it yields a relevant decision recommendation. Next, please. There are two roles of AI in risk analysis. And by the way, I'm going to put together, no, it's the previous, okay. Previous one? Okay, well, that's two roles in two roles of AI. And I've put together GAI and LLMS in risk analysis. The information, the base is automatically updated. It can be very large. It must be value neutral, hopefully no tweaking of the data. In other terms, there is no risk attitude in the information base. And the main role of AI is information gathering and processing. And when I say AI, again, I also mean generative AI, large language models, and deep learning. I put all that in AI. The second role is decision support. The information is the basis of risk management decisions, and decisions under uncertainty require specific preferences and a risk attitude. And the risk attitude of the AI system must become that of the decision maker to be relevant. The challenge is to ensure the alignment. Next, please. Our problem is the AI control of preferences in risk management decisions. Full AI control of risk management decision is rare, but it's increasing. And it implies that the preferences of the analyst or the large language model agent determine the recommended or implemented decisions. So the user should know how AI-based decisions and recommendations are generated. And the AI system should be flexible enough to ensure the AI alignment with the decision makers. And the AI system preferences should fit the goals of the deciders, including the people who are going to be affected by the decision. Next, please. Next. Okay, human control. When and how should a human being control the preferences? Well, in conjunction with an artificial intelligence algorithm, or as part of a hybrid team, a human and a robot, an AI system that I designed with one of my students to give warnings of cyber attacks, included such a human and robot hybrid team. And the question was how to make it work properly. And in that case, the human was telling the robot was correcting the robot when needed. So we have a technical and an ethical problem. The ethics of the system are those implemented by the analysts a priori. Full control of operations by an AI algorithm in critical situations may be rare for the moment, but pretty soon will become much more common, for example, in autonomous vehicles that I will talk about in a few minutes. Next. There's a potential mismatch of preferences. AI risk attitude reflects differences of variations of outcomes utilities, that is, a willingness to face high or low outcomes. AI decision support includes the preferences encoded by an analyst in a standard utility function, including a risk attitude. And it's interesting because it's very often what you find in an AI system, or based on statistics from the general practice. And that's in part what is done in medicine. So the effect of the analyst's risk attitude on the suggestions or the decisions is that it fits his or her preferences. So one needs flexibility to ensure that these preferences reflect the values of the actual decision maker And the problem is that when they do that, they do not know who the decision maker generally is. So our problem is to address and fix the potential mismatch of risk attitudes between the AI system and the decision maker. Next, please. So some problems of risk attitude alignments. And I'm going to give you here 4 examples that I will discuss further in this talk. Medical decisions, choice of a test or a medical treatment. Fully autonomous vehicles, what are their rules of operations? And we're going to discuss that too. Autonomous defense systems, and in this case, military drones and different kinds of automation of military drones, and to use or not the autonomous. Finally, some sports race that I'm very interested. For example, regattas with AI information available. So the problem is always the same. What do we do given the AI message? And I will add at the end of this talk the future challenge that we're going to have using quantum computing to support decisions under uncertainty, because quantum computing is going to come and the support will be a lot faster and a lot more difficult to control, even though it will have a lot of advantages because it will tell you immediately what's going on. Okay. The guidance levels of some AI-supported decisions vary, and with the imperativeness of the AI message and advice. For fully autonomous vehicle, it's an automatic decision, so the risk depends on the AI information and the system's risk attitude. For medical advice, it's only strongly guided decisions, so the doctor and the patients have the choice. But they do not know the source of AI information nor the decision rule. And so it looks pretty imperative. But in sailing race, it's soft guidance for the choice of the course. The risk is to sail in too much or too little wind, and the skipper needs to make a decision. We're going to see how it works. What is our process? Well, the AI system receives and processes information, communicates it with the decision maker. The decision maker may have very limited time to accept or reject information. That's particularly true in military decisions that I have seen. That time may not allow for an evaluation of the message, nor for asking for additional information. Alternatively, an automatic decision is implemented by the AI system, and the question is, can one improve that AI system so that it can be accessed and the parameters can be adapted to the situation? Excuse me. Okay. So what are the analytical assumptions about AI and the decisions? In this process, we assume the following. The information is generally correct. That has been my experience, even though I recognize in particular in medicine that it's not necessarily the case. The AI system automatically updates the database content, either with Bayesian updating, machine learning, of which Bayesian updating is apparent. The decision maker is rational, and either maximizing his or her expected utility or using other decision rules, and for example, adapting a popular choice. For instance, everybody in the country does X when something medical happens to a patient. But the decision makers are generally not involved in the design of the AI system, and the choice of risk attitude and the analyst may not even know who they are. So now, let's move. Okay, so this is the processing of incomplete uncertain information, gathering and processing of risk analysis data. In reality, there are often hidden biases in the AI data. The choice of the model boundaries, what's in, what's out, the choice of the data sources, and possibly the choice of likelihood functions. In other terms, the information is not perfect. But for the moment, we're going to assume that we use that information. Next. So, illustrative problems that I'm going to show you doctor's office, sailing race, military, full autonomous vehicles. Next, please. So let's go to the AI information in the sailing race. You've probably never been in a sailing race, but the problem is the following. A skipper of a boat has access to an AI system that provides information about the winds, waves, and water speed at a distance, and tells the skipper, would you like to change your course because the wind looks really better in that direction? So if you change your course, you are more likely to. So how should she use this AI-generated information in the choice of a course? And the information is the speed and direction of the wind from a given source in the AI-monitored space and the direction and speed of the currents. So the skipper's decision is to bet on the AI message. And here are the decision parameters. And first, her interpretation of what the AI is telling her. So the AI system accuracy as she sees it. Her own evaluation of the wind and its effect on the race. Her evaluation of the risk attitude of the system. Is it too conservative? And her evaluation of her boat's position in the race. Am I likely to win if I continue the way I am? So her response is a function of her trust in the system and the risk attitude. What's the risk that she sees at time zero as her current chance of winning and the probability that her ranking might get worse? How important to her is the race outcome, and what is the winning opportunity that she sees given another option? So let me show you a map or a figure that I wrote. So you see at the top, the coast, the land in green. And then underneath the water. The position at time zero of the boats that I consider, boat one, my boat, boat two, and boat three. Boat one is faster but slightly behind. Boat two is ahead but slightly slower, and boat three is behind but could come back. So the skipper has the choice. Option one, to take the advice of the AI system and change the course, and option two, to stay in the position in which, in the course that she's following for the moment. So here, the skipper of boat one believes the AI message, trusts the AI risk attitude, and she takes the risk to change the course. Option one. And she wins. She wins because she arrives slightly ahead of boat two, because indeed the weather and the currents were better as the AI was telling. Next. Now the skipper could have chosen to stay the course. And in this case, skipper one prudently chooses option two, and which is that the boat one follows the planned course. As you can see here, her choice. And here, she loses to boat two, which is slightly faster, and that's bad luck, because there was probably 50-50 chance in this case that she could win. So next slide. What are some of the skipper decision factors? The main critical factors are the information quality and the risk preference of the AI recommendation. She actually trusts the information. But in addition to the parameters of the information system, the skipper's decision reflect her own risk attitude, her expectations about the performance of the competitors. That's very important, and the AI system doesn't look at that. Her expectations about the performance of the competitors, again, and her estimation of her current position and chances of winning. So a quick mental decision would allow identifying the best option. And I say mental. You're not going to take a paper and do a decision analysis, but you're going to do some quick Bayesian updating in your mind. And so the best option will be based on the skipper's assessment of the situation, of the AI system, and our interpretation of the message. Okay, so that was my skipper story, and I've seen it. Let's go to the next example. A medical doctor and his or her patient. And here is the situation from the patient point of view. The patient is in doctor's office. She doesn't have symptom of breast cancer, but the health agency recommends a mammography. So she said, okay, let's do that. After that, there is the possibility of a sequence of tests. It's an option. Starting with a needle biopsy, then a surgical biopsy if justified by remaining uncertainties. And the remaining uncertainties, in fact, let's face it, are in part because the image is not very clear. So the doctor recommended a needle biopsy. It's done. It's negative. He has access to an AI system that then recommends the surgical biopsy as, quote, best option based on minor uncertainties in the results of the needle biopsy and a very conservative risk attitude on its part. So now the doctor says he recommends a surgical biopsy. What are the options and the influences? The patient has three decisions to make. The mammography, done. The needle biopsy, given minor visual uncertainty in the pathology, and to adopt the recommendation and do a surgical biopsy after that. What are the influences on the decision to accept the surgical test? The needle biopsy seemed clean, but it could be a false negative. The doctor wants, given minor uncertainty in the pathology, the AI system and the doctor now want a surgical biopsy to be sure. Of course not. The surgeon who would make that surgical biopsy is adamant that it should be done for reasons that are not entirely clear. So the patient has three decision makers in this, and advisors with possibly different risk attitudes. The patient, her doctor and the AI systems that he relies upon, the surgeon who wants to do the surgical biopsy, and the key variables at include the prior probability of a breast cancer before any test. That's a very important part of the story. The probability that the needle biopsy result was a false negative, the probability of finding a tumor through the AI-recommended surgical biopsy, and the decision about surgical biopsy is influenced by the trust in information and by the preferences of the AI system. But we're going to see that in this case, the patient preferences dominate. So what's the patient's viewpoint versus that of the doctor's? Indeed, she is aware of the small probability of a false negative from the needle biopsy and of the fact that a small tumor could be discovered by the surgical one. But she is more risk tolerant than the AI system and the doctor, and decides against a second test, given the previous negative results, thus a minute probability of tumor, the pain, the scarring, and the chances of a false positive in a surgical biopsy. So there is a difference in risk attitude between the AI and the patient, and it's resolved by a second opinion from a highly qualified expert because there is enough time to get it. Now, rejecting the AI advice. So contrary to the choice of option 2 in the setting race, the patient's preference prevailed in the decision over those of the AI system and the doctor, and she rejects the surgical test. Some reasons: there is a very low prior probability of a tumor in the first place. There's a competent and independent expert available. There's enough time to get further information before accepting the next test, and there's a very small estimate of the probability of a tumor at that stage. So the decision to reject the surgical biopsy was apparently successful, but as always, things could turn out differently. Now, next example. Limitations of AI in defense decision. That's something that I've discussed with some defense commanders. Decision of the US DoD to use or not artificial intelligence in some combat situation. For example, the use of autonomous drones. The US DoD limits the use of AI technologies in some cases. There's a formal statement that no launch of US nuclear weapons would be triggered by an AI. That we all know. But also no use of autonomous killer robots, that is, in drones, which is our focus. But the US adversaries, potential adversaries, Russia and China, have not made such a commitment. So what would be the impact of their drones on the effectiveness of the US defense given instantaneous decisions? That is, there's an attack and there's a need for a response to an attack or not. So the potential adversaries policy may cause US problems of deterrence and of response to a drone attack. So let me tell you about some risks of the autonomous drones. The attacks may be accidental mistakes in the identification of the target, the lack of human control, and in instantaneous decisions of the AI system, possibly a large number of unintended civilian casualties, and an attack may trigger a major crisis. So the AI system may launch an immediate drastic attack in response to an adversary move, whereas human control may be more restrained. So there's a gap of risk attitude between the state, between the system and. Now I need to tell you that we have two kinds of drones: the automated drones with pre-programmed flight paths that do not control their launch, but may in the future. They provide real-time information to commanders in combat and rescue missions, in particular, the anti-tank surveillance and logistics. Whereas the autonomous drones that already exist but are not used by the US can pick their own target, identify and track and attack, identify the target, track, attack, and kill without human intervention based on AI navigation and operations instruction. So again, they are not used at this point by the US, but by the potential competitors. There are legal and ethical issues in the use of autonomous systems and possibly war crimes, given the objectives and the choice of targets. But under a massive attack, it may look like the only effective solution. So let's move on. Some of the risks of autonomous drones I have already mentioned. The attacks may be accidental, and now let's talk about the risk of increased use of autonomous drones. The role of AI in defense is likely to increase, and when everything accelerates, autonomous drones may become part of US operations, especially if an adversary uses them. Again, ethical considerations are necessary in managing the trade-offs, and the US operators need to understand the risk preferences and the parameters that are encoded in the US system, the AI system, and consider the future effects of an attack. And again, I want to say that having talked to some of the top commanders of this country, I realized that they are not particularly interested in using AI information and AI systems in very critical situations. Next, let's look at fully autonomous vehicles. And again, there are two kinds of automation: automated versus autonomous systems. The autopilot decisions in current automated vehicles, like mine, are based on sensors and reactors with software control in the local computer. There is no AI here. But fully autonomous vehicles are AI-controlled systems, for example, self-driving taxis. And they are rare now, but they will probably become much more common. Some risk issues are the unexpected reactions in autonomous cars and the failure of others to recognize them, and moves and errors that can be different from those of bad drivers, including the drunken one. Next. Okay, what are the situations, the problems, and the perceptions? The behavior of autonomous vehicles may be a mystery to many people. The software rules can cause risk-taking by the by the cars, that's the autonomous car, potential malfunction, and legitimate but unusual moves that are often unknown to the public. So it's not what people expect. It's legitimate, but it's not what people expect because it's not what the persons would do it. And there's a popular feeling that AI-based defensive reactions are not sufficiently protective of ordinary people. So there's a fear of autonomous cars, and currently a widespread rejection of AI-controlled vehicles. And depending on the source, you find that 50% to 90% of people don't want to hear about that. So, information and risk-taking, the AI problems. Autonomous cars are likely to be globally safer than ordinary ones, but the unexpected but legal moves of autonomous vehicles may be different from those of human drivers. In addition, there are technical failures, attacks, and misperceptions that can cause injury or death and property damage. Those are information problems. AI software malfunctions can cause inaccurate mapping or wrong moves. For example, a vehicle running through a red light, which of course the system should know. The software can also cause failure to recognize a pedestrian, an animal, or other vehicle, or a hole in the ground, which is a case that I've seen. A hole in the ground that the system thought was simply a change of color. Well, no, it was a hole, and the car fell in it. The cyber attacks and cyber hacking also could directly affect the control system. Now, let's compare autonomous cars versus human drivers. The autonomous cars are likely to be globally safer than ordinary ones. And there's an interesting study from Waymo, which is a self-driving car company, but they used statistics and good statistics of accidents in 2022. And it was 6.8 times lower crash rate for the Waymo's autonomous vehicles than for regular ones. But the reliability of AI programs is affected by the risk-taking. The software is meant to be conservative, but it's imperfect and may not react the way, again, human drivers might react. For the moment, again, there is very little desire for people to be driven in an AI-controlled vehicle, and it will take systems improvement, further tightening of design and operations, and an increased familiarity of the people with AI technology to cause a change, which will probably happen, but it's going to take a while. And we have taxis in San Francisco that are autonomous cars, and I'm curious to see how the increase of use of these taxis will happen. Now let's get back away from and back to the general problem of alignment of artificial intelligence. The problem here is how to address the possible gap of risk attitudes, as I have mentioned before. To implement the right risk attitude in the AI system, one needs to identify the rational decision maker, identify the decision maker, and encode his or her preferences, which might take time, and we may not have that time. If it is a collective decision, we need to identify where we'll have to make the call. Someone will. In reality, the system is often based on the risk attitude of the analyst. The key issue is the ethics that is reflected in the preferences, including the trade-offs involved. And here it's safety issues versus performance. The next question is, what is the risk attitude of the decision maker, and how can we capture it? Next. Okay. Now, the risk attitude can be derived from a utility function and is derived from a utility function. The utility U of X, included in the AI software, involves a risk attitude, rho of X, for each outcome X. And rho of X is minus the second derivative of the utility divided by the first derivative, and those are again encoded utility. And it depends on the outcome X, except for the risk neutral, where the U is linear. That utility curve may be concave for the risk averse, convex for the risk seeking, or linear for the risk neutral. If the focus is on popular decision, statistics may reveal variations over time of the utility of outcomes, and that's due to two things: change of knowledge or variations of political points of view where you believe one information versus another. And the alternative, one may focus on professional practices and beliefs. That's what one could do in medicine, for example. And the preferences may also vary over time because information and knowledge varies, but it's anchored in knowledge. What can we do to attitude? We can adjust the AI system's risk attitude, but it's not easy. So step one is to ensure the transparency and the flexibility of the AI system. That is, we need to be able to open it so that we knew what is the encoded risk attitude explicitly or through the information that has been used. Then a disclosure of the dynamics and possible changes of preference factors, the risk attitude, over time if it is relevant. So we need to anticipate here what we know, what we don't know, what we're going to know in the future. The second step is to adapt the encoded risk attitude in that system to the preferences of decision maker or operator and the people affected. So first we need to know what it is. So step two is to encode the user's utility function if one has the time, and it can be done by classical decision analysis. And the process is to encode the utility curve point by point, and the way to assess it is to assess the utility of the certain equivalent of a lottery at each step through the corresponding probability of winning as estimated by the decision maker. And by generation, we generate the whole utility curve for the whole outcome range. Step three is to align, fixing, the risk attitude of the AI algorithm to match that of the decision maker that we have just encoded, thus eliminating the mismatch between the system and the user. So what are the implications for the AI systems engineering? In the systems design, the algorithm of the AI-based decision-making system must be accessible, understandable, and adjustable. And the risk factor itself is not, the risk attitude itself is not understandable by everybody. So one needs to see what it means in lotteries. And it must allow replacing an embedded AI risk attitude by that of the decision maker. In the operations phase, one needs to include the decision maker's risk attitude or values in the decision algorithm or account for it directly when making critical decisions. So one can use the AI recommendations as decision support with the correct risk attitude now, provided that the decision maker trusts the problem formulation and the data. So again, there are two aspects in all this. The data, which we assume pretty much in this study that we have checked them or we agree with them. It's the risk attitude that we are questioning. Now, let's look what's going to happen let's look what's going to happen when we shift to quantum computing in systems analysis, in AI systems. That's going to happen sooner or later. Because quantum computing is not very common now. Quantum computers are very, for the moment, are prone to frequent errors, and they are not many around. But it is going. And the problem of risk attitude discrepancy could be even more serious because the quantum computers are so quick. So the qubits processing time way shorter. The quantum systems provide information and recommendation much faster than classic computers. But there are very few quantum computers for the moment, and they are prone to frequent errors. Why? Because it's due to the need for low operating temperatures, and it's difficult to control. But yet, they are improving very fast. So the decision time may be next to zero. and the decision maker may not even have time to check the premises and may decide to ignore the information. Not yet. An example in defense, the possibility of future use of quantum computing to guide the launch of drones that I've described. There is a problem of risk-attitude discrepancy that could be even more serious in this case because we do not have the time to realize what's going on. So let me conclude. Next. Let me conclude by saying that we need transparency and flexibility in AI systems. The system's users generally do not know the risk attitude and the preferences that are being implemented in AI systems that they deal with. That risk attitude determines the AI decision, which may automatically be implemented or simply recommended. The preference factors should be accessible by opening the AI algorithm, and that's not obvious. You need to have the help of your analyst or through examples of past recommendations, and it would then be possible to fix it to match the situation. That is, to match what we know, what are the sources of information, and what's the decision maker. So the automation of decision processes may well be a source of fear of AI. There are two factors here. People may not believe the information, but it can be attenuated if it's understood that the differences of risk attitude is a factor, which was the case in the decisions that I have faced and described. So if the problem is explicitly recognized and the system can be fixed, then we can solve or address at least that problem. And I will be happy to take any question that you may have.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. That was very interesting. And we have quite a few questions, so I'm going to jump right in. First question, is the utility function of an AI system known? For example, for the Skipper AI example, do you know the AI system's utility function?
Yes, because I've gotten into the AI model. And I have talked to the person who had written it because I was very interested in knowing what the story was. And so it's by talking to the analyst and talking to the people that the analyst, in fact, has interviewed to write the system that I could figure out what the risk attitude was. And in the case, I decided it was perfectly fine. And I decided to go ahead with it. So you have to get to the analyst to understand what's going on here. Did I?
Kind of picking up on that, who should get to determine the risk attitude and more generally the utility function for something like an autonomous car? The manufacturer, the car owner, the government, and what should they consider in setting this?
I would say the manufacturer and the operator. It's the operator who is going to be responsible for what the cars are doing. And the operator has to understand what people understand and don't understand. So first, there are two problems. The system can have some mistakes in it. If there are some mistakes, fix them. But the system can be fine and do exactly things that are totally legal, but that people don't do. So the operator has to understand that discrepancy and to fix it, and to ask the analyst to fix it, so that people are not surprised by what the AI system is going to do. But again, the AI system can also make mistakes, and I was mentioning the case of the car that fell in a hole because it did not recognize the difference between the hole and a change of color of the street.
And kind of picking up on that, should this preference, this risk attitude be fixed in time, or should it be something that, say, the operator could change?
It has to be changeable because risk attitude may change. The risk attitude may change because the circumstances may change. And I'm thinking about the defense problem, for instance. You may change your risk attitude if you realize that the autonomous system would do enormous damage, which you do not want. And you may realize that the ethics are such that you need to change your risk attitude. So yes, you need to, again, you need to work with the analysts to change your risk attitude and or yourself, the operator, the one who receives the information may decide, no, I'm not going to do it because I think that this is a way to risk taking.
Okay, and it looks like that prompted a follow-up question. What is the advantage of trying to match the AI to decision makers' attitude instead of designing the AI system to be risk neutral and then allow the decision maker to apply their own risk attitude?
Because the decision maker will not know what his own risk attitude would do in the recommendations. So yes, the decision maker can say, the heck with it, I'm not going to do it. And I've heard particularly military commanders telling me, okay, the AI can say what they want, I'm going to do what I want. And in fact, as I showed in the regatta, in the race, sailing race, the skipper can decide to ignore the AI system and do what it wants, what she wants. But it's really useful to know what an AI system who has all the information and has your risk attitude in it tells you what to do because it's quicker and it may have a better, it may have a recommendation that fits better what you would know if you actually did the analysis. But indeed, you can ignore the AI system or put a risk indifference in it, see what comes out, and decide what you want to do. Yes, you can do that.
Okay. Slightly different question. People show a strong preference for risks they choose over those imposed by others. Does this play a role in how people view risk from AI decisions, even when the AI agent is acting on their behalf?
Yes. Yes. They prefer their own preferences to those of others, but sometimes they do not know what their own preferences would lead to. And that's where the AI system, if it's well adapted, can be very helpful. That is, it does your decision analysis for you. So, but it has to have your preferences in it. So you can ignore what the AI system do, and in your mind, in your brain, do a quick mental decision analysis and decide what you want to do without the AI system. But it helps to have a formal decision analysis if you can put in it your own risk aversion, risk preference, etc.
Okay, then we have kind of a set of questions that I'm going to kind of combine here. So a few people have kind of asked this question. Okay, so what if we built an AI system to basically do the probability estimation problem, and then built a separate automated decision system and explicitly put the utility function and risk attitude in there? Can we separate it this way? Do you think that would work? What problems would this entail?
Yes. Well, I agree. I agree that having two parts of the AI system would be very helpful, and so that you are able to open the decision part and find the risk attitude and change it without messing up the information phase. The problem will be to link the two systems in such a way that the decision part has the full information from the information part. Now, it's not infeasible at all. But it has to be well done so that you don't miss, you don't lose some of the richness of the information. And in fact, you must also allow the change of information, which happens all the time. You have all the time new information, whether it's medical, whether it's especially defense, and that needs to be included. You don't want it to be directly in the decision system, but you want the decision system to have this updated information correctly input in it so that the decision that they recommend fits the information that you have.
Okay.
Did I answer the question?
Yes, very interesting. So here's another question. In a medical recommendation system, is it just about the risk attitude, or also the decision rule that is implemented? For example, prioritizing younger versus older patients for life-saving operation.
Yes. And that is a question that I have not addressed here, which is when you have trade-offs, and trade-offs are parts of preferences. And these trade-offs in medicine are clear. In fact, I had an example here of surgery, where you have a quick surgery that you have an improved surgical system that will have less time to recover, but of course, a higher chance of, because it's new, a higher chance of an accident. So these trade-offs indeed also have to be considered when you use a risk analysis system. And I totally agree with those who asked the question that it's not it is part of the risk attitude, because you have a risk attitude that in fact is a function of all those trade-offs. But I have not separated them in my presentation.
Okay, thank you. Another question. I wonder about cases where the AI has less skill than a human in the loop system, where a human, for example, is directly nudging models to achieve better results, AI or not. What if there is truly a performance limit that is below what can be achieved through the manual intervention in models? And what would be the ramifications for that in what you're doing?
You're exactly right, whoever asked the question. The humans sometimes know much better than the AI system. They know much better about the immediate situation. They know much better about what's happening and the details of what's happening. It's true in medicine, for example. The patient, in particular, knows things that the AI system does not. And we say, hey, you forgot, I don't know, my weight, or you forgot that yesterday I had a cold, or you forget, or you do not know. So it is true that the human being may have a lot more information. It's also true in defense. And there I've talked to people who had to make serious decisions in defense, and they know more than the AI system may. Now, the AI system may know more than they do about what the adversaries have written yesterday, have said they would do, actually will do. It could be that the commander knows more about what's happening in this country than elsewhere. And again, I'm not saying they do, but it's a case in which, sure enough, the decision maker knows more than the system. And so that's part of the information, and it becomes part, of course, of the risk attitude and the decision and the optimal decision.
Great. Checking time. We got time for another question or two. So there's a 2021 articles. This is a question that somebody posted online in the journal Strategy Science, posits that many of the AI products are big technology companies repurposing for external customers capabilities that were originally developed for internal use. And many of those internal uses seem to be low stakes decisions, like pushing out a digital ad to a targeted user. What might this say about risk preferences designed into such out-of-the-box AI services?
Well, but they are probably not those of my decision maker. So in a case like that, I would like to know what are the preferences and what is it that internal versus external does to the preferences that have been encoded. I may completely agree with them because they know what they are doing in general, but they may not be addressing themselves to people that are similar to me. And so I want to know the difference. I want to know what are the preferences of the internal and what are the preferences that they assume for the external. So it's not extremely simple. I have to be able, again, to talk to the analysts to be able to interpret not only the way they have been dealing with the information, but the way they have used that information in their decision recommendations. Did I answer that one?
Yes. Excellent. I'm just checking time here. One really quick last question. So guiding principle in risk analysis, as you said, and I agree with this, is that we want the risk assessment to be as value-free as possible. but analysts choose what information to use to train the large language models. How do we keep that value free?
There's nothing I can do. What I cannot keep it value free, but I can sometimes figure out what kind of distortions and biases they have put in the system by seeing their recommendations. So again, it's by talking to the analyst that I figure out how they have determined the boundaries of the system in the first place, what kind of information they have kept in and left out. Very often, I look at the extremes of the distributions and I figure out that they have truncated the distributions. So I say, well, but there's the possibility of an extreme here that we have not looked at. So this is what we are doing.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I know there are some questions we didn't get to. I'm sure Elizabeth would welcome email questions, and hand it over to Hilda to close us out.
And
Oh, well, go ahead.
I want to thank Seth for being part of this. Seth was one of my doctoral students, so we know each other well. And I really appreciate the way you have been asking the questions and presenting me.
Well, thank you.
Well, I just want to thank all our speakers, Elizabeth, Sam, Seth, and Neil, for this presentation. This presentation is recorded and it will be posted on the SDP website at decisionprofessionals.com. Thank you for your participation, and now we can disconnect. See you next time.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.